Hello and welcome to the I Love Me Lab show. My name is Gail Buck, and I'm an NLP Master Life Coach, meditation instructor, and a seeker of happiness. And each week, we're going to bring you an inspiring person or message to help you discover additional ways of self-care, self-love, and becoming a healthier, happier you. So thanks for spending time with us today, and let's let the show begin. Hello and welcome to the I Love Me Lab podcast. And I'm so excited to be here today with a newer friend, and her name is Leks Vucko, and she is an optimal performance coach. And Lex is pretty cool. She has been involved in the sports and fitness and nutrition world for over 20 years, and she's got some really great things that she's going to tell us about. So welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Sure. And we were having a really cool conversation before we started rolling and started recording this about mindset and the things. So here's what I'm really interested in right now. So I'm a little bit older than you, like by a couple of decades. And so I'm all about health. I want to live a long and healthy life, and a long life is key. And I noticed in like I was looking at your website, and you have stuff on longevity, right? So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so I've always been interested in health, like, eating right stuff and, sleeping enough and things like that. I think it's becoming more evident in the last few years. There's more talk about why sleep is so important. And that's when I started learning more about longevity and how it's not just about having a good quality of life now. It's about having a long quality, high quality life. Like, why are some people skiing at 88 and going on cruises and some people are not? And I love to see everybody else as a mirror image of me, and I love to learn about other people and why they do what they do, and that's what fascinates me about the brain work. So I've come to realize and find out that, the more the research they do, especially lately, the more they realize genetics are only a potential. They only influences us if we allow it through our environment. And when we say environment, it's not even just, what's around us, which is what people often think about. It's also what thoughts are we having? Where's our emotional well-being, right? And the biggest fun thing for me to understand was we can influence all these things. We can control these things. We can change these things. So the ability to extend our life and have a true quality of life is like super fascinating for me. And again, they know now that genetics is nothing. Like, if you don't want that genetics, you can literally turn your genes on and off. And that's powerful to know.
Yeah, and that's really interesting that you should say that, because as people get older, so I'm in the age where a lot of people are retiring, which is a term that we use in the United States. And when people retire, they either go off on adventures or they hunker down in front of the TV, right? It's kind of like one or the other. And my mother is from Mexico, and we were having this conversation yesterday with a neighbor. In Mexico, you say se jubilan, which is basically, it's like you're in jubilation, right? It's kind of like you've done all this work and now it's party time, right? So now it's time to go out and have adventures and have fun and things like that. So
Interesting.
yeah, so that all kind of plays to mindset, right? What are you looking for at this time of life, and how are you going to live this, next chapter in your life?
Yes. And you see that, people have been kind of sold this idea that they work for whatever, 40 years or whatever, and then they retire and they're supposed to enjoy their life. But at the same time, you see people doing just that. Like you said, sitting in front of the TV and not really challenging themselves anymore, or, they're supposed to learn new things. But it's like, if you understand that whatever age you're in, that you're retiring, you still have like at least a couple of decades, at least these days. That's 20 years that you can make amazing, absolutely amazing. And to me, it's like, I want to live until I take that last breath and fully live, feel and experience life, because we only have one.
Yeah. So my goal, my wish is to live till 120, but be actively creating, working through 100, and then maybe chilling down a little bit after 100, but not laying around kind of a thing, but really be actively creating different things, right? Going into different adventures and creating different business models and things like that. Well, into that's my plan. That's the plan.
So you hit the number that's very interesting because I
Mm,
listened to a scientist talk about the quality of water and how water is actually a current, but not just in a sense that it's a current for electricity, it's a current for our own energies. And they've done studies on water where they put words in front of water, and it takes on crystals based on the words. If the word is love, it takes beautiful crystals that look like snowflakes. And if it has words like hate and anger, it actually has very like deformed crystals. And the
mhm.
scientist that I was listening to was talking how we actually have a potential to live till we're 120. It's that
Oh, wow.
people even think that they die from natural causes, but what it is that we're actually just dehydrated because the tap water or the quality of water that we drink is not the type of water that is full of these crystals that would actually help us stay hydrated. And if you think that we're 70 to 80% water, that makes sense how influenced by water we are. So they've done a study in Japan. I forgot the name of the scientist, but you can look this up even on YouTube, where they took tap water from Japan and they showed under the crystals were deformed under the microscope. They gathered children who sent love and gratitude thoughts in the intention to the water, and the water actually changed to have beautiful crystals. So we
Wow.
can affect water with our energy. And it's funny because you said 120, and I'm like, I got something for you, Gail. I got something. We
There
got
you
to talk
go.
about
So I'm
water.
making it till 120.
Yeah.
So, because you have all this experience and history in nutrition, and we talked about sleep, and I want to get into sleep more because in my household, and by household, I mean my parents and sibling in this generation of household, my mom teases me all the time because for me, sleep is really important. And I go to bed early. I also get up really early, but I go to bed early and I get minimal 8 hours. Usually it's closer to 10. And I don't like to be interrupted in my sleep. And I get teased about that. But I also believe that sleep is super important to staying healthy, right? Is there anything else
Yeah.
that you want to speak about sleep? Because then I want to jump into water a little bit more.
So sleep is also very interesting. Now they know that and it makes sense. Like I always go back to how humans lived for millions of years, because the way we live now is only in the last few decades that we live like crazy like this. So you always have to go back to what is the body used to. So it's the most natural thing for our eyes, and it's very important that it's our eyes without the any block in between, without any sunglasses or anything like that, to see to have exposure to actual sunlight in
Mhm.
the morning, early morning, like between 8 and 10 a.m. And then that offsets the inner clock on when melatonin is going to get produced in our body, therefore when we're going to get tired and when we're going to go to sleep. So it's like that's one of the ways to affect sleep. I'm going to speak from my experience and add that I used to think that I was a night owl my whole life. My whole life, I was like, I'm a night owl. I can stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning, and that's just the way
Need
my
four
brain
hours of
works.
sleep only. Yeah.
No, I would wake up at like 9, 10. Like if I would wake up
Mm.
before 8, I'm like, that's too early. Like that was me my whole life. Gail, let me tell you, I now get up at 6:30 latest without the alarm. And the difference is, well, one, I'm exposed to sunlight. We moved to Panama now and I have sunlight every day.
Mm.
Two, I'm actually truly excited about my life. I've
Yeah.
done so much inner work about where my thoughts are, where my emotional well being is, and I look forward to the day ahead. So that's one of the main differences is how we feel on the inside about ourselves, about our life, about what's potential in our life. That's been a huge game changer for me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and we're gonna dig into that too. See, there's so many things for us to talk about. So, but I don't want to leave the water alone quite yet. So, with water, do you
Mhm.
think, and we don't have to spend a lot of time on this if you don't want to, but filtrations and things like that, how important is that to you, or is it not?
Oh, it's so important. The tap water is full of chemicals. It's been through pipes. It's just collected junk all around. Whether it's you want to talk about energy, whether you talk about metal, whether you talk about chemicals, it's full of things that we don't need and it affects us heavily. If you think about how much water we need to drink throughout the day and how much we drink, and if it has anything inside it throughout the years, this is layers and layers of junk in our body. So the quality of water is very important. There are a few filters out there and they're different prices. You can find like from 200 to like, I don't know, probably a few $1,000s worth of
Thousands, yeah.
stuff. Yes, but it's doing the due diligence and doing the research and not just reverse osmosis, but what else it does to the water, and ideally having that tap water. There is nothing like rainwater. Okay, that is one kind of water that is absolutely, I mean, if we could collect it, it would be the most optimal because it's gone through so much transition in and natural transition within the earth, within the nature, that when it comes down, it is the most pure, the most beautiful form of water that we can have. However, it is only as clean as the container that we collect it in. So I think if we actually started paying attention to how could we collect water, rainwater, we would
Hmm.
be on the right track there. And we wouldn't have to, I don't even know the term, like take the salt out of the ocean water, because now that they're talking about how there's not enough water and things like that. And there's these huge places where they take salt out of water, and it's like this super expensive process. Like, wait, we have rain. Like this
Yeah.
nature gave us everything we need. But back to your question about filters, it's actually very important. I would actually even add more to it to say, have it in a glass container if you can, if you're holding it anywhere in the house. And of course, if it's a current, like the scientists have been shown that it is, it's very important how we interact around the water and with water. So it's the crystals, back to those crystals, it's shown that it has good reaction to classical music and even contemporary really good melodies. It forms those beautiful crystals as opposed to some other water. So, starting to pay attention to, oh my God, wait a minute, water is the source of life. Waters are all around me. I am majority of me is water. So how can we make that water better? Filtration system is very important. The type of it, the quality of it, and again, the energy around it.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting. I hadn't thought about the rainwater. I mean, I like to dance in the rain, but I hadn't thought of
Love
drinking the
it.
rain, but I'm going to think about that. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
got to taste delicious too.
Oh, I'm sure it's like heaven.
So, mindset, which I also spend a lot of time in that space. And my question for you is, there's so many things going on in the world right now, and people have different things, like in my case, I have one of my kids has a bad drug addiction and all the things that go along with it, right? So for me, it's been this, I say, lifelong journey on finding ways to manage my mindset and to help others manage theirs as they
Yes.
navigate this very challenging space. So what do you personally do if you wake up and you're having a day where things aren't going the way you want them, or you're in a funk, or maybe something pretty challenging has happened? What do you do to bring yourself back? Which I think is key, right? Just to kind
Yes.
of, allow it and then bring yourself back to some place a little more
Yes.
centered.
I think this is a very important subject because, you hear about positive thinking and then you hear about toxic positivity as well. I think we can all test ourselves in our own journeys because emotions are to be felt, but they can also be addictive. So if we feel anger and it becomes a dominant emotion and we feed into it, it becomes what we become addicted to. Our body and our brain become addicted to the chemical cocktail of emotion that it is, of
Mhm.
the hormones, that's what it is. And then we get stuck in that emotion. And so we're 95% subconscious, we're only 5% conscious, meaning now I'm angry all the time, but I want to be happy. Well, I just made a conscious choice to be happy. 95% is running the show. And I can't just jump from anger to happiness just like that, if anger
Right.
is what I'm stuck in. So there is a process of, peeling the onion, in lack of a better term, of finding, what works for each person. And there are different things that work for different people. So it depends on the situation, depends on the time of our life. Sometimes these one thing works, sometimes another thing works. But having a tool in front of us is very important to have. So for me, I've trained myself and I've learned to recognize and believe that just because something appears that it's an awful or bad situation doesn't necessarily mean that that's what it's going to stay being. And then I learned to ask myself, what is my lesson in all this? One of the biggest lessons for me was letting go of trying to control the
Yeah.
outcome and letting go of trying to control how someone else is going to react. So letting go and loving people for who they are is a big lesson. It was a big lesson for me. letting go of that expectation of what I think they should do. Um,
Yeah, that
so
word "should"
that's
is yeah, I try and
should.
eliminate that from my
Yeah, like
vocabulary
Tony
is
Robbins
yes,
says, we should all over
all over
ourselves.
ourselves, yes.
So it's very important that we, yes, exactly. It's very important that we recognize, okay, this is what I can control. I can control my thoughts, I can control my emotions, and I can control my actions. Not an easy task, but it's so hard to do that on ourselves. It's so easy to judge others. So if we start looking at others as a mirror image of ourselves, I can say, okay, where am I doing that in my life? Okay, what is that projecting onto me? What is my trigger in this? That's been a huge one for me, is in any situation that has happened, I go back and I think, what triggered me there? And then why did that trigger me? What did that make me
Yeah,
feel like internally? Did I feel out of control? Did I feel anger? Did I feel reminded of something from the past? What is it? And working through that. And going back to toxic positivity, it's very important that we talk about this, because it's really not about always being like, oh, things are great, da da da. I'll give an example. I do feel great 99.9% of the time. I do. But for example, I have a bit of anxiety before I travel. And I had to book a trip with my son that we have to take to New York in a couple months. And right away, booking the trip, I was like, oh, whoa, there's anxiety. Now, if I started to push on myself to say, no, 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 everything's great, it's going to be great, I would not have allowed space for that emotion to be felt. So what I did is
mhm,
I said, oh, that's anxiety. Okay, what am I feeling? Where am I feeling it in my body? And then allowing space for it. The moment I said that to myself, there were tears going down my
mm,
face. And again, if it's toxic positivity, I would have been like, no, 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 that shouldn't be sad. This should be great. It's going to be. I went, okay, let myself experience. I'm going to let myself experience this. I sat with it. And Gail, within a few minutes, I was like, whoa, I feel like just lifted off of me. And I feel like, emotions just want to be felt. But the moment we try to suppress them, when we try to say they're not there, they're not existing, it's all great, we're actually suppressing them and they stay in our body. But if we just
yeah, and
let
I
them transform, that's it.
yeah, and I think that's what happens a lot of times when people go to big seminars and the big gurus and things like that, and I mean, Tony will tell you, you can change your emotions in an instant. And you can, but then
You
there's
can.
something more to maintaining that. I mean, you can change it in an
Yes.
instant, but that's why oftentimes when people return from events like that and they weren't able to maintain it because they didn't really develop the tool to maintain it or know how to get back there,
Yes.
then they feel like they failed in that process and they didn't at all.
Yes.
It's because it's only a piece of the puzzle.
Yes.
It's
And
not
I
the whole
think
thing.
to that note, it's very, very important to understand we're not going to be great the first time we try something. Okay.
Mhm,
I think that
mhm.
we as adults, we're so great at, watching children and encouraging them to start learning how to walk. A toddler is learning how to walk. And you're like, oh my God, go, 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 keep going. We're so great. And we know bullying is horrible. Yeah, we bully ourselves because we're not
Yeah.
great at something the first time we try. So give yourself space. I'm big on meditation, and I tell people, I'll ask somebody, "Do you meditate?" And most often, people will say, "Well, I tried, and it just doesn't work for me. I can't sit there and not have any thoughts." And I'm like, "That's the actual practice, right? Like it would be like saying, "Hey, let's go learn how to ride a bike," and you go, "Well, I don't know how to ride it, so I'm never gonna like know how to ride it." And you go, "But that's what we're about to do: is learn how to ride it." And we all know, just like driving a car. First time we sat down to drive a car, it was nerve wracking, right? Like, oh my God, there's so many things to think about. Now it's an autopilot. It's a process. It takes time for the brain to get it, for it to become a
Yeah.
part of
And
subconscious.
also, to what you said earlier, Lex, where we're all different, right? So
So different.
just as we're all different, there's a lot of different forms of meditation. It's not always just sitting there for an
Yes.
hour in total silence.
Yes.
It can be chanting, it can be a walking
Yes.
meditation, it can be a
Yeah.
mindful meditation. There's so many different
Can
ones. It can be
be.
a
Yeah.
3-minute little process where you just disconnect from everything to center
Absolutely.
yourself and then you go. Yeah.
Absolutely. So meditation means becoming familiar with. And if you think of it as becoming familiar with your own thoughts, it can be done
Mm,
anywhere. So think of anything that you do where you lose track of time. Like, people will tell me like, I love to garden. I'm like, well, that's your form of meditation.
that's right.
You go in there, you start being aware of your thoughts, but you're going to lose track of time because you're in the moment, you're in the
Mhm.
flow. That's a form of meditation. Yeah, it doesn't have to be sitting in a certain position at a certain time. And yeah, no, let's
Total
let's
silence with no thoughts
yeah.
whatsoever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's impossible to do, especially on the first try.
Now, something we haven't talked about, which I notice every time that we see each other, is that you are extremely fit. And I went into your website, and so you've done some bodybuilding contests, or you've worked
Yes.
in that space. Can you
Yes.
tell me about that, and how do you maintain that?
Yes. So I'm very thankful for the whole experience in bodybuilding. I've done it. I've done it a few times. I learned a lot from it. I stayed in it for too long and recognized I'm in it for the wrong reasons. I'm trying to fill a void in my life that I felt at the time.
Mm,
I don't hide it anymore. I did at the time. I developed a binging disorder because of it. But it was very powerful to experience that because it showed me that it's not all mind. There are some things in our body that are built for survival, right? So the main thing for our body is survival. So if you start dropping that food too fast, in a way that it's not serving the body kicks in and the survival mode kicks in. And no matter how much I tell myself I'm stronger than this, there's a point when your body's just trying to survive because it's thinking there's not enough nutrition, there's no food around, there's different hormones that actually kick in the body. So I felt what it felt like to feel out of
mm.
control. So when people tell me like I can't stop, I'm like, I get it. I get it. We got to
I
talk
can't
about
stop eating, you mean, or I
eating.
can't.
I can't stop eating. I can't stop whatever it is that I'm doing, right? So there's a lot of psychology to it. There's beliefs of who we believe we are, but there's so much beyond that to our relationship with food and all of that. So what I love to talk about is when it comes to being fit is finding what optimal performance fit means for each person. And what I mean by
Mhm.
that is if I found what's most greatest for my body. I work optimally at this. I have a ton of energy throughout the day. I think good. Think clearly. Like I know how my body operates. I can go and work out and have energy after the workout. I know how to do a workout where I'm not punishing myself, but actually bettering myself. That's
Hmm.
a big one for people. But it took me a while to get where that is, where that fitness level is for me. And oftentimes when I say optimal performance, people are like, well, that's a six pack, that's a lean body. And then they see my images from bodybuilding. And I'm like, no, that's not what that means. Because you have to find what's optimal for you. If we go too low, if we go higher in body fat percentage, it's actually affecting how our brain works, right? Like it all goes together. So when it comes to optimal performance, which is like what I love to talk about, is finding your best fit, right? Like not lying to myself and saying, well, I'm just going to eat, one fast food meal a day and that's what works for me. Okay, well, we know that what happens with those ingredients, right? But also finding what's the biggest balance for me. Like for me, I love being at my best, feeling that I did everything in the day to make myself feel great. But then my husband, he's kind of laid back. Like every once in a while, he'll have a juice, which for me, I'm like, why would you ever do that to your body? And he says, well, it's kind of like an 80-20 rule for me. He says, 80% of the time I'm doing great. So 20% of the time it's like, it's cool. Like that to him is balance. And it was a moment for me. I was like, oh, okay. So that works for him. Not everybody has to strive for this level that I'm striving to be at, and then recognizing, is this adding stress to me or not? So finding what's normal and the most optimal for ourselves. And as far as being fit, people seem in there like, well, you must, work out for an hour a day and, every day. And I'm like, I work out 2 to 3 times a week, about 30 minutes. But I found
Really?
what works for me. Yes. And I know how to
Wow.
push myself enough in those 30 minutes. And I know how to adjust my energy as well. Like, especially as females throughout our month, and our energy is not always the same depending on what hormones are running through our body. For men, it's a little bit different. But at the same time, you will have a day you didn't sleep well, you didn't eat well. Like, I had a day I forgot to eat that day. And I showed up for the work and I'm like, why am I feeling so weak today? And I'm like, oh, I didn't eat. For me, training on an empty stomach is not optimal. For some people, they thrive on that, right? So once again, learning about ourselves, what's the best for us. And then I learned, okay, this is when I need to eat so that my stomach is not full. Like it's just a whole observation of my own body. And I come to terms where, okay, this is what's best for my body. If I train more than that, I get so sore all the time. It takes a lot for my body to recover. I found that this works best for my body. And so for somebody, mentally they want to train more. Great. There are people who love, Tough Mudder and things like that. Great. I actually help them train for that. But that's not what's optimal for me for what the results that I want. And I think that's also important, is to determine, what is it that I want? How is it that I want to feel? How is it that I want to operate every day? Because for an athlete, and for me, it's going to be different. For someone who, has 5 kids and is, has different priorities in their life, it's going to look a little different. But I do believe that we can, even in 10 minutes, 3, 4 times a week, we can achieve amazing results. It's what works for us, for our body, and for our lifestyle.
Now, do you feel that it shifts between men and women, and it shifts like, like a 20-year-old to a 30-year-old to a 60-year-old to an 80-year-old? Is there a lot of shifts in, because as we get older, yes, we can stay healthy and I want to live to 120, but there are some changes that, like, the hormones have left the building, right? Some of them.
Right.
So what are some shifts that you do as people are in different age groups, for example, or don't you?
So that's where mindset starts coming in more, where we have to be very careful what our beliefs are, because
Hmm.
we've been taught we age and things change with age. And, I've heard this before, like, oh, the moment I hit 30, oh, the moment I hit 40, or the moment I hit 50, everything changed. I'm
Right.
like, what is so significant to nature about 30, 40, 50? And it's like, no, we chose those numbers. So it's not
Hmm.
necessarily the same for everybody. I do believe that the environment plays a big part. And again, environment is not only where I live, but how I live, what kind of food I eat, what kind of water I drink, what kind of conversations I'm having with people.
Right.
All of those things influence us. So I wouldn't even say men, women, as far as training goes, depending on the time of the month. Absolutely. Um, I wouldn't divide it into men, women, or age groups. I would really divide it into very individual beliefs, things, backgrounds, willingness to do, willingness to not do. We really have to get in touch with our own selves more than, well, these are the statistics for women, these are the statistics for men. We really have to be careful about that, because it always goes back to who we are. Like, one of the things I paired up with Inside Tracker, my clients get 25% off of that. But what it is they get blood work done. They go to a lab, they get blood work done, and based on their own blood and their own DNA, they get a
Mm.
report of what their optimal levels are on testosterone, cholesterol, cortisol, like all those different biomarkers. But it goes based on their own body and their own DNA, rather than, well, this is statistically best for men
Yeah.
from here to here. And that's very powerful, is because now we're talking about science for our own individual body. And that's why, like, I love working with them, because it's like, I don't have to worry about, well, how many carbs should this person have, or how many, should they go on keto, or should they, what is optimal for me is very different than what is optimal for you.
So this
That's
is, you said
where,
that was BioTracker, you said that was?
no, Inside Tracker.
Inside Tracker. And so
Yes, and I
that'll,
have a code that I can share for 25% off.
oh, cool.
Inside
Okay.
Tracker, it connects to Fitbit, it connects to Apple Watch, and they have different deals on what they can take. The one that I have for my clients is the biggest one. It's just like 43 different biomarkers, but it just gives, and it gives not only that analysis, then it gives recommendations on nutrition and on water. And if a person connects it to Fitbit, let's say they go running, they come back and says, good job, now you need whatever, 1 gallon of water in the next 2 hours to completely rehydrate based on your activity, and so on.
Wow. So your whole program really is very individual to, I mean, even drilling
Yes.
down to their
Oh,
DNA, right? So maybe
totally.
my cholesterol marker is going to be completely different than yours. And what
Yes.
I need to eat or to do to make it better, if that's what I need,
Yes.
is going to be a different program than maybe you would, for
Oh,
example.
totally. Totally. And that's where it becomes powerful, because it's like, it's not just the age group of women from, this age to this age based on the research. It's like, what is for my DNA? What is it that I need? Where do I need my
Wow.
cholesterol to be? Yeah. Super powerful stuff.
How interesting. So then you don't follow a particular, I had last week a couple of doctors that are all about more vegetarian, more plant-based food, right? So you're
Yes.
not plant-based or keto or paleo
No.
or,
No, and when it comes to diets, I do have a problem with them. They're very disempowering, right? Like, if I give
Mhm.
you a meal plan and I say, Gail, this is how you need to eat, I'm taking the power away from you for you to listen to your body, to listen to what it needs, and to also make choices for yourself, which already is going to start having the effect. This is why people go, and do something else that's not in a diet, and they feel like they failed, and it just starts this whole
Right.
catch 22 of, dieting. Um, when it comes to vegan, vegetarian, keto, all of that, I do believe that it's different for everybody. And this is why I feel like you have to really get in tune with your own body and test different things to see how it's going to affect you. Because even gluten can affect you completely differently than me.
Hmm.
Corn, soy, dairy, sugar, of course, it still affects us all differently. And we have to know our body. This is why, like, I help my clients get in tune with their body. It's like, it's like when they started telling in the 80s, like, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And it's like, breakfast only means breaking a fast. It doesn't really give me
Hmm.
the time of when I need to eat. And most people find out they're not actually hungry in the morning. And now through research, they're finding out where it's even better off not to eat in the morning. And again, if you think how humans live for millions of years, sporadically, this is why fasting in general is a good thing for people. But once again, we cannot force what we believe is the best because it goes back to where our ancestors are from. And I think this is why the conversation whether we should be vegan or vegetarian or eat meat will never end, is it because it again has different needs for different groups. I mean, if you look at people living in North Pole, their diet is predominantly fish,
Mm.
like fatty fish, and
Yeah.
it's like protein and fats. And it's like for somebody like me, I would feel like it would be inflammatory all the time. But there are people who thrive off of that. So there's a lot that goes into it, and
It's interesting.
I like that slowly medicine is starting to look into each person as an individual, and I think there's beauty in that because now we're discovering, oh, wait, I'm very different than you. Yes, we have similarities. We all have bones and structure and all of that. But your needs, your dietary needs are very different than mine. And they will also change based on our activities, right? And different times of the life. Like for months, almost a year or two, I ate one meal a day, which they call OMAD, one meal a day. And it worked great for me. I worked, my body reacted great for me. And then all of a sudden, it didn't feel like it was working optimally once again for me. It was just becoming too heavy on my stomach, even though I didn't change what I was eating. So now I eat within 4, 6, sometimes even 8 hour window. I'm not strict, and it's never strict. It's never about being strict. It's about what works for me for today in order for me to have the optimal for performance for today.
Wow. So now when you say that you're an optimal performance coach, I totally have a clearer picture because you're
Yes.
like the whole being, right?
Yeah.
The body, what you're eating, your working out, your mindset, which is hugely important,
Yeah.
all the pieces of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I say, I help people have their optimal performance physically and mentally. And I don't say emotionally because we don't really tap into emotions. But if you look at your physical and your mental, it cannot not affect the emotional and even the spiritual, right? Because you
Sure.
start thinking about you as a whole and what's beyond just this body and how can I thrive? How can I feel even better than I do now? And my big thing, and we talked about it before the call, is you have one life. Like, we all have one life. Like, how do I use it to the best of my ability? But how do I be the best that I can be for today, right? Like, there's that whole thing, be 1% better a day. I don't see success as a straight line. I always think of stock market, right? It's going to go up and down,
Oh,
and I'm
yeah.
not sleeping great, and different hormones and different times and whatever. But how can I show up today for me and for others and be the best me that I can be today? Tomorrow's a
Yeah.
different story.
Wow. I love it. Now, I see that you also have a program. Let me see. Let me see if I get the 6 phases to becoming invincible.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit to that? Because I'm getting a clearer picture now, and it just sounds really
Yes.
exciting.
So it's kind of the baseline of the program, right? Like I said, and you said it, everything's very individual. But there are things that I've seen that if we work on, they improve us and our lives the most. So like the phase one is setting up the strong foundation, right? Like getting away from what we think we know about our body and when we should eat, and starting to get in tune with our own body, setting up clear goals on how I want to feel, what is my vision of the future. And it becomes very exciting to people because it's like, oh, I never thought about what is it that I want. And you start understanding that, oh, I can influence my life if I change. I think that's one of the biggest things, is understanding that I have a choice. I have a say. It's not the easiest choice all the time to control my
Hmm.
thoughts and emotions, but I can certainly learn to do it. But first thing is foundation. How do I even, where am I going? Right? Like most people are like, well, I don't know. It's like, well, are you going to go to New York or Miami? I don't know, somewhere on the coast. Well, it's
Yeah.
very different depending on where you want to go, right? What kind of experience you want to have. Then we go to phase two, which is creating the unstoppable machine, as I call it, to create the body that we can reverse aging, we can get to peak performance, we feel that unstoppable energy. Because, I've had thyroid issues in the past, and I've had all kinds of, especially when I was competing, all kinds of issues where I didn't feel great. I felt like I was dragging every day. And now I have so much energy, and it's like, everybody can get there. Of course, different energies and what you want. Some people like to be
Right.
more, calm and peaceful. I'm all about energy. So how do we reverse aging? How do we talk about, longevity? How do we even increase testosterone? A lot of people are afraid of that word. Women feel like they're going to get bulky, if you go to the gym. And it's like, no, testosterone is actually very important. And these days, estrogen, even in men and women, is becoming very dominant, and we're having less and less testosterone. And this is becoming very evident through the issues and the diseases that we're having, but also through lab results. It's becoming very
So are
evident.
you talking about like estrogen and testosterone, like in pharmaceutical and in like a, or are you talking
No, no,
about
no, no,
through
no. How
food,
to
or are you talking?
naturally, yeah. I'm always about natural. Like I love supplements to a point, and I like them sometimes even in the beginning to boost things. But I'm always looking for how can my body operate on its own, because I truly believe, and I've seen it on me and others, that the body has the ability to fully heal itself and thrive if we give it the right stuff. So
Mhm.
how do we do this naturally? I don't really like pharmaceuticals too much. So that's the so then there's a phase three, and that's the unbeatable mind. How do we make our mind stronger, right? And I just made a TikTok about this today. I said, a weak mind is not a disciplined mind, and we become slaves to a weak mind because we don't even have willpower. We think we have, but we're running on subconscious. So having an unbeatable mind, being more disciplined in the areas that I want to thrive in, right? How do I become more relentless? How do I even have that unstoppable drive going on, but not be like, I'm very driven, and it's like the motivation goes down? How do we become, so self-aware and so strong-minded that we are in charge? Like I say, I'm going to go work out, I go work out. I say I'm going to meditate, I go meditate. I don't fall for that lie that we always fall for, is, oh, I just don't feel like it. That's like the biggest lie of our brain. And then we go
Right, it's like
to,
we don't even have we're not even making our own decisions, right? It's like, "Oh, I'm gonna do this
no,
tomorrow," and then the day it's like, I'm just
I
not
don't
going to."
feel
Yeah.
like it. I don't have
Yes. I'm too
time. We have all these
tired, or yeah.
things. Yep. 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 And those are lies that our brain says to us based on our past conditioning, which is why we're 95% subconscious. So the more we know how the brain works, the more we can affect our lives.
Mhm.
So then we move to success rituals, as I call it. This is the AM and PM habits, things like meditation, visualization, and done in such a way that it work for us. Like we talked about it. Not everybody needs to sit like for 3 hours and meditate. Although I do now sit for 2 hours a day and meditate, but I
Do
didn't
you really?
start
Wow.
there.
Yeah.
I didn't start there. I certainly did not start. Oh my God, I certainly did not start there. I was one of those people who are like, how do I even sit still? So there's, again, learning how to ride a bike. It takes time to learn it, but also looking into our habits. Our habits create our life, because our habits are what's
Mhm.
habitual, what's subconscious. So setting up the right habits of how do I start my day? How do I end my day? Because those are the first things that I can slowly start changing. It's all about small change, by the way, always about small change, because the brain is going to freak out. The subconscious is going to kick in and bring us back to how it was. This is why people who are like, oh, I'm going to go work out, I'm going to meditate, I'm going to do all the, no, no, no. Just let's start with one thing. Let's start with 10 squats every day, right? Like just training our mind for us to be in charge of it.
Yeah.
Creating these habits that are going to work for us. Then the phase five is the art of self-control, which like it's like my favorite, but the hardest thing to do is learning how not to suppress our emotions, but how to actually control them. In other words, how to control them without suppressing them. And it's
Hmm.
like, how do I, deal with a situation that's in front of me, but then find time and space to deal with the emotions that come with it? Because I heard this years ago and I love always saying it. When the emotions go up, the intelligence goes down, right? Like when we get
Yeah.
emotional, we don't think clearly. So this is when
Right.
we learn to control emotions, which helps us handle pressure and stress in a really healthy way. And then the last phase, which is phase 6, is getting cellular, as I call it. And that's really talking about longevity, reversing aging. How do we affect our genes? How do we affect them as opposed to them affecting us? Basically, the more you get in tune with yourself, you start realizing how much power you have over you. And that's becoming invincible, because now I'm responsible and I'm empowered by every action that I take. And if I didn't do something, great, I'm just going to look into it. What triggered me? What made me not do it? What lie did I buy into? And then just
Right.
fix it for the next time. And that's it. It's really a stock market path. Up and down, up and down. Allow failure, welcome triggers, because then you clear them and they never control you anymore.
Wow. Well, that is very powerful. And this is is it a group course or this is
No, I
the
typically
six
do one on
phases?
one. Yeah. I may eventually do group, but I find that I really enjoy one on one setting, because I can really help a person with exactly what their issue may be or what their limiting belief is. And I'll tell you something, most often it stems in some form of low self-worth for all of us. It's this, if we start focusing on self-worth, feeling worthy, feeling like we deserve better, feeling like we can control the not the outcome, but what how we deal with it.
Right.
And
Right.
we understand it's a process, and we start changing those bullying thoughts that we have to empowering thoughts. Whew, life changes. That's why I do the work I do. I changed my whole life. I do not know who I was 10 years ago. Oh my God, when I look at pictures, they had recently, like on Facebook, that 10-year challenge or whatever. I thought, let me look my picture up for who I was 10 years ago. I looked at that picture and I thought, oh my gosh, I don't even know who I was,
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it. You fall in love with, you don't, I don't regret who I was, but I fell in love with the journey of discovering me, also creating me, shaping me, challenging me. And when we fall in love with the
It's
journey
really
of
beautiful. Really.
self-discovery,
Yeah.
that's when it becomes really powerful. Yeah.
Wow. Well, is there anything else that you want to share with our listeners? I mean, there's so much here that
I would first say is understanding that the life that we have right now is created by our thoughts from the past, which means if I start slowly, keyword slowly, being aware of my thoughts and changing one thought at a time. Scientists say that we have 60 to 70,000 thoughts every day, that most of those thoughts are the same thoughts that we had yesterday. So, of course, I'm not going to change 60,000 thoughts today. But if I start changing one thought, I'm starting to plant a different seed. And if I stay consistent with that, that means that my future tomorrow will be created by my thoughts today, and I can conquer that. And there's no better feeling than learning how to slowly conquer your own thoughts and your emotions.
So, Lex, this is the I Love Me Lab podcast. And so the final question I have is if you were going to give one bit of wisdom to our listeners, one way that they can, love themselves more and take better care of themselves, what would be that one thing?
Thoughts. Recognize that you've learned to bully yourself. And you, at the end of the day, only have you. I have my family, they're great, but they're not with me 24/7. I am only with me 24/7. So only I can affect my own thoughts at the end of the day. Yes, environment affects them greatly, but I can take charge of that. So a journey to self-love, again, starts with thoughts. Change one bullying thought at a time. And it takes time to figure out how to even say it nicely. I had a client call last week and he said, I caught myself. I didn't want to say bullying stuff. But he said, it took me a while. I didn't even know how to say things to myself nicely. And that's the journey. It takes time to learn how to be kind to ourselves because we've been mean to ourselves for so long. So the journey starts there, and it starts going to self-acceptance, being okay with who I am, to then loving myself. If we can separate ourselves just for a minute, and this is why meditation helps, and see ourselves as we're all in this together, we're all in this connected, and we're all these beautiful pieces of this beautiful puzzle. But the puzzle doesn't work without you. We're all pieces, and we all matter. Understanding you're just as valuable as your neighbor, as the other person, as whoever it is around you, and starting to work on that inner chatter and beating that bully in your head with a positive thought. That's the positivity that I like, not the toxic positivity. One thought at a time.
That's beautiful. And I think even recognizing when you are bullying yourself, right? Just recognizing
Awareness.
first.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Awareness comes first. But then not being judgmental on that thought, right? Because then
Yes.
it goes, oh, I was so judgmental. Oh, I should not have done that. I should not have thought that. No. I'm just recognizing what was my pattern from the past. Now I'm going to change it.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for spending this time with us. I look forward to
Absolutely.
a lot more future conversations with you. Absolutely.
Me too. Yeah.
And
Thanks for having me.
thank
It's been a
you.
pleasure. Yeah.
Thank you. And for all you listeners, thanks for listening. If you want to reach out to Leks, you can reach her at leksvucko.com or check out her website, leksvucko.com. Is there any other place that they can reach you?
It's probably the best way. I mean, I'm everywhere. I'm on TikTok. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm somewhat active there too. And it's LeksVucko. Yeah.
Yep. And we will have your information on the show notes, and we'll be posting it out there for anybody that wants to reach out. And if you don't see it, you can always reach to me, and I'm happy to connect you to Leks.
Absolutely.
So listeners, thank you so much for being with us. And Leks, you too.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Sure. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Thanks so much for listening to this conversation. If you enjoyed it and want more information on our guests and resources, please visit ilovemelab.com. And please, if you enjoyed this episode, remember to subscribe and share with a friend. Hey, there's more great episodes to come. So until next time.